Voices buried in static, files stamped in red, the kind of secrets that stain hands long after the war ended. In the shadows of World War II and the Cold War that followed, entire histories were erased, not forgotten, suppressed. What if the truth wasn't just lost, but locked away for a reason? Somewhere behind sealed vault doors and burnt pages lies a story too dangerous to be retold, and yet it keeps whispering to be heard. On the night of January 17, 1945, Allied aerial reconnaissance over East Prussia detected a sudden blackout across Königsberg. Intelligence analysts at SHAEF suspected the Germans were evacuating crucial research assets before the Red Army arrived. When American OSS operatives intercepted scrambled Wehrmacht transmissions referencing Krake, the codename was flagged, but context remained elusive. Official OSS Directive A3427 authorized a covert team to infiltrate what appeared to be a subterranean command center beneath the ruined Königsberg castle, a location already rumored to hold esoteric archives of the Unearthed and experimental. Reich Technologies, the assigned team, designated OSS Field Unit Kilo 14, consisted of 6 officers fluent in German and Russian, led by Captain Daniel Mercer. Their orders, signed off by Colonel William J. Donovan himself, were simple. Retrieve any research documents related to enemy advanced communications, psychological warfare, or emerging weapons systems. The team crossed Polish lines on April 3, 1945, aided by a group of captured Hitler youth forced to guide them through the collapsing city. The boys were never seen again after the first day. Kilo 14's initial transmission back to SHAEF, logged as 040545 at 2100 hours, reported the discovery of sealed iron doors beneath the castle, each marked with the Unearthed insignia and reinforced with concrete. Soviet troops were closing in fast, but Mercer chose to proceed. He wired a second coded report. Entry confirmed. Documentation in sealed crates. Notes reference Projekt, Krake. Nothing more was heard after that. Soviet records recovered much later in 1992 indicate that a small American unit was intercepted near the castle, but escaped capture through a storm drain system. From that point onward, the Kilo 14 team vanished completely. 5 months later, in late September 1945, an unsigned courier package was delivered to an unlisted PO box used by the OSS. Inside were 3 photographs stamped top secret and a blood-stained notebook. The notebook contained shaky handwriting, apparently from Captain Mercer himself, referencing sound-based neuroweapon prototypes and non-chemical interrogation devices. He repeatedly wrote, "They wouldn't let us leave." The photos showed massive lab machinery, wired to what appeared to be iron chairs with leather restraints. One image depicted a German scientist wearing a lab coat, pointing at a large chalkboard, depicting a wave pattern labeled Krake frequency, phase X. The courier was never located. In 1946, a post-war intelligence merger gave birth to the CIA. A restricted file labeled Eclipse 7 was created, containing everything recovered about Operation Krake. Only a handful of individuals ever reviewed it, among them Alan Dulles and General Walter Bedell Smith. Dulles scribbled a personal note in the margins of a memo. Technology potentially viable, moral hazard extreme. Archive personnel reassign immediately. Another memo, dated 02/11/47, orders all field agents who participated in the Königsberg incursion to be transferred or debriefed under special conditions. 3 of the original 6 operatives were reportedly reassigned to domestic intelligence work. Their names vanish from all subsequent personnel lists after 1950. Soviet involvement remains murky. Declassified KGB files from 1963, unearthed during the Yeltsin era, mention a covert program designated Chimera, believed to be derived from stolen Western intel, labeled simply Krake apparatus. These Soviet files reference low-wave frequency devices for behavioral disruption found in a Königsberg bunker. Soviet scientists involved were reportedly sent to Siberian institutes within the Gulag research system. Rumors persisted that the Soviets attempted to recreate the Krake machine, but suffered severe neurological damage among their test subjects. In a bizarre twist, one of the only surviving Kilo 14 members, a communications specialist named Lieutenant Harold Crane, was interviewed privately by Senator Richard Russell in 1953 during a closed-door committee session on clandestine wartime technologies. According to a single preserved transcript page, Crane stated, "It wasn't just equipment. They had prisoners strapped in cages, civilians, voices in the walls. We heard laughing, even though the machinery wasn't powered." His testimony triggered a classified order for indefinite psychiatric observation. Crane later died in a VA hospital in 1957, cause of death listed as self-inflicted lacerations, though one nurse's statement recorded blood patterns that didn't match the orientation of the wounds. Over the decades, physical remnants of Operation Krake were dispersed, locked inside separate warehouses under different false inventory codes. In 1971, 2 reel-to-reel tapes marked Krake Audio Test, Beta Range, were catalogued at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. When played, the tapes emitted low-frequency pulses that caused nausea and disorientation among listeners. One technician claimed to hear distinct whispers layered beneath the tones. The tapes were subsequently reclassified and removed by men claiming affiliation with the Defense Intelligence Agency. In 1999, an independent German historian named Dr. Ulrich Scheer attempted to locate the sealed chambers beneath Königsberg Castle, now Kaliningrad. Russian authorities denied excavation permits. 2 weeks after his request, Scheer died in what was officially declared a gas leak incident. His widow later sent a letter to a British journalist stating Ulrich had received threatening phone calls warning him to stop investigating the machine below the ruins. The journalist, Malcolm Reeves, began researching the case but disappeared in Prague 3 months later. Today, what remains of Operation Krake resides in fragmented documents, scattered across American, British, and Russian intelligence archives, each bearing heavy redactions. The US government maintains no public acknowledgement of OSS Unit Kilo 14's mission, though a heavily censored FOIA request response issued in 2012 confirmed that a small reconnaissance team did enter Königsberg in April 1945, and that technical items of interest were recovered and remain classified for reasons of national security. No further comment was provided. The surviving 3 members of the original OSS unit are presumed deceased. Their families received no military honors or official explanation for their service. One widow reported that men in dark suits visited her home in 1948, instructing her never to speak about her husband's wartime records. She never heard another word. In the decades that followed, numerous conspiracy theorists connected Operation Krake to unexplained acoustic harassment incidents, vanished Cold War scientists, and even modern crowd control research. Regardless of speculation, the core facts remain locked behind security clearances and forgotten catacombs beneath Kaliningrad, along with whatever technology was created there. If Krake was destroyed, there would be nothing left to hide, but government silence suggests otherwise. At 02:40 hours on May 12, 1945, 9 days after Germany's official surrender, a Luftwaffe U-352 transport aircraft made an unscheduled landing at a secluded airfield near Mittenwald in the Bavarian Alps. The airfield, once used for Nazi high command training, had been cleared and secured by a joint SS Ahnenerbe unit just days before the Reich's collapse. According to intercepted signals by the US 970th Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, the site was designated Zone Fight 12, later flagged as a known destination in the final days of the Kammler Group. SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler, the enigmatic engineer behind Nazi secret weapons programs, including the V-2 rocket, had last been seen on May 9th in Prague. Allied intelligence believed he had defected or died, but field notes from CIC agent Lieutenant Saul Whitaker, recovered years later, tell a different story. The Whitaker report, case file 2237C, declassified 1998, states that at 0400 hours, a 6-vehicle convoy, including 2 half-tracks and 3 unmarked Opel Blitz trucks, departed Zone Fire 12 under heavy fog. Aerial photographs from a US reconnaissance P-51 captured the movement, but the convoy appeared to disappear midway through the Leutasch Valley Pass. No further sightings were recorded. An immediate search by the 3rd Infantry Division produced no results. The trucks, the personnel, and the cargo vanished. 2 days later, a mutilated German courier was found near the Partnach Gorge with a coded packet sewn into his uniform. Inside were heavily encrypted schematics, handwritten in Sutterlin-Schrift, for an object labeled Strahlkörper Type Keen, Morgenrot module. The design resembled a small-scale fission weapon, but included unfamiliar notation referencing an isotope not yet identified by Allied physicists at the time. British scientists reviewing the material would later match some of the formulas to early prototypes of what became known in 1950s US research as pure fusion initiators, decades ahead of their time. A second document in the packet bore Kammler's personal seal and was addressed to G. Wolf, believed to be Gerhard Wolf, a former Nazi diplomat stationed in Rome, known for his involvement in art theft and gold shipments. The message included the phrase Projekt Morgenrot abgeschlossen, die Arche ist unterwegs. Translated, Projekt Morgenrot completed, the Ark is en route. Multiple intelligence agencies, American, British, and French, opened overlapping investigations into the phrase Kammler's Ark. All were abruptly shut down by 1947, with files sealed under national security prerogatives. Surviving memos from Operation Dustbin, the Allied effort to interrogate captured Nazi scientists, indicate that several detainees who had worked under Kammler were transferred without explanation to American custody and never seen again. Paperclip. Records omit their names entirely. One of the few surviving pieces of physical evidence came from a depot raid conducted by the French 12e Bureau in the outskirts of Innsbruck on August 3, 1945. A single steel cylinder was recovered from a warehouse owned by a shell company linked to Kammler's aide, Dr. Wilhelm Voss. The cylinder, roughly the size of a torpedo, contained sealed ampules marked with the International Radiation symbol, though the design was hand-painted and predated known Western variants. The item was removed by American military police within 24 hours and officially recorded as damaged radar equipment. Years later, in a 1961 internal CIA memo, Ref. Eyes Only, Scout Lantern, Alpha, Director Alan Dulles refers to a rogue shipment evacuated by Kammler through the Alps and expresses concern that Morgenrot materials may have been diverted to non-state actors with latent nuclear aspirations. The memo references an intelligence failure of atomic proportions and recommends reactivating post-war OSS files under Operation Siphon, believed to be a tracking program for Nazi-looted technology. In 1983, Argentine customs officials seized a shipment of antiquities from a private collector in Bariloche. Hidden beneath crates of Renaissance art were 6 rusted storage canisters bearing Luftwaffe inventory codes. The German embassy immediately intervened and the canisters were transferred to an undisclosed location. No official explanation was given. According to a leaked Argentine naval log, one of the containers emitted faint levels of radiation and required special handling. Independent journalist Dieter Bergmann, who investigated the incident, was found dead in his hotel room 3 days later. Official cause: heart failure. He was 38. Meanwhile, post-Cold War German archives, opened briefly between 1991 and 1994, revealed scattered invoices from the final days of the Third Reich, including a payment ledger referencing Anlage Morgenrot, Morgenrot facility, near the Obersalzberg region. American satellite scans from 1974 show deep subterranean anomalies in the area, later sealed by construction of a NATO radar station. German officials deny the existence of any wartime tunnels at that site. Former US Army intelligence operative, Coltrane Robert D. March, RET, gave a rare interview in 2002, just before his death, confirming that a convoy carrying atomic-grade materials left Mittenwald in May 45 and never surfaced. Some believed Kammler used it as leverage to cut a deal with the Allies. Others believed it made it to South America, with the weapon intact. When asked whether the US ever recovered the so-called Ark, March only replied, "If we did, it would never appear on any manifest." To this day, Operation Morgenrot and the fate of Kammler's Ark remain unconfirmed. No official accounting has ever been made of the missing nuclear material, the cargo convoy, or the documents intercepted in the courier's uniform. Freedom of information requests for Straalkörper-type Gefein continue to be denied under National Security Article 7A, which applies to weapons systems still considered strategically sensitive. As recently as 2017, seismic anomalies were recorded beneath the Loitash Valley. Unexplained underground detonations with no geological cause. Locals recall old stories of trucks that entered the mountains and never came out, and of a man who swore he saw lights under the ice one winter night in 1946, long after the war had ended. Whatever Kammler built, he took it with him. The Ark, if it exists, has never been found. But intelligence officers across 3 continents continue to refer to a silent protocol activated only in the most guarded circles. If Morgenrot opens, assume nuclear latency. The Cold War ended. The shadow of Kammler did not. In late November 1950, as United Nations forces advanced northward during the Korean War, British intelligence received a series of anomalous radio intercepts from a remote sector of Manchuria near the abandoned Japanese fortress town of Anda. The transmissions consisted of distorted screams layered over fragments of Axis-era Morse code. Analysts at Bletchley Park initially assumed it was chatter from Chinese psychological warfare operations, until archivists recognized references to obsolete call signs once used by Japan's infamous Unit 731. On December 8, 1950, an emergency Mi-6 directive tasked a specialized signals exploitation team, codenamed Raven Group, to investigate. Comprised of cryptographer Lieutenant Christopher Holt, radio engineer Sergeant Marion Blake, and a security contingent of 5 Royal Marines, the team crossed into Chinese territory under the guise of Allied recuperators searching for downed pilots. Lieutenant Holt's official diary from the mission, classified file CX47822, begins with an entry noting that the snow around Anda was soaked in rust-colored stains that villagers claimed appeared every winter since 1945. A local farmer, speaking through a captured interpreter, reported that ghost cages lay buried in the woods, metal frames that had once housed prisoners during human experimentation. He guided Raven Group to a dilapidated underground complex covered by collapsed roofing beams and frost-shattered brick. Inside, the team found Japanese paperwork stamped with a faded, blood-red seal, Experiment Keigo, Specimen Valhalla. Many pages contained sketches of human anatomy blended with phrases like preserve memory, induce obedience, and test subject hears screams of ancestors. Most chillingly, a steel cage in the corner still contained shackles and restraints, fused with dried bone fragments embedded in the rust. Holt's diary notes a series of audio recordings on magnetic tape, each labeled in Japanese kana, voice pattern A through voice pattern F. Sergeant Blake attempted to play tape B on a portable unit. Raven Group records described the room filling with a shriek that did not resemble a voice at all, followed by a deep pulsing hum. The team immediately experienced vertigo and nausea. 2 Marines collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. Reportedly, one of them screamed, "Turn it off, they're still alive in there." The team's field report, filed 2 hours later via encrypted burst transmission, includes the statement, "This is not chemical or biological in the traditional sense. It's a sonic manifestation of extreme trauma, recorded and re-amplified. The victims are somewhere in those tones." Mi-6 ordered Raven Group to destroy the facility. They doused the underground structure with thermite charges and set it ablaze. However, before extraction, Sergeant Blake disobeyed and smuggled 2 tape reels into her kit. The tapes were handed over to British intelligence upon return to Seoul. 3 days later, Blake was hospitalized with acute auditory hallucinations and seizures. Her medical file states she kept whispering, "They can see me now." Declassified. Documents indicate the tapes were flown to RAF Whiten in England for analysis under a project labelled White Storm. Engineers noted the recordings contained embedded frequencies below the human hearing threshold, laced with captured screams of test subjects. On February 12, 1951, during a playback session, the chief acoustic technician, Dr. Alfred Bromley, suffered a brain hemorrhage and died 3 hours later. His autopsy revealed cerebral lesions similar to extreme PTSD, despite no prior trauma. Vatsikau. Tapes were seized by order of the British War Office and placed into a classified vault. White Storm was terminated. MI6 issued a directive forbidding any further analysis. All Raven Group members were separated and reassigned to unrelated posts. Lieutenant Holt resigned from service in 1953. According to a confidential psychiatric record, he claimed he could still hear the exact same voice every time a radio played. Static. Holt committed suicide in 1954. Chinese military authorities subsequently reinforced the Anda site by constructing a restricted garrison zone. Foreigners were forbidden entry. Unconfirmed reports in 1962 described Chinese technicians transporting sealed black crates from the area accompanied by Soviet advisors. During the Sino-Soviet split of 1966, a Soviet defector allegedly informed the CIA that the USSR had acquired trauma-based sonic warfare prototypes from Manchuria, derived from Unit 731 archive fragments. No corroboration has surfaced since. In 1979, a series of grisly murders occurred in Seoul. Victims were found with burst eardrums and brain hemorrhages, with no external injuries. A South Korean police investigator privately contacted British consular staff, claiming he recovered an audio tape from one crime scene marked with Japanese characters. The tape was immediately confiscated by unidentified men. The murders were never officially linked. To this day, the White Storm tapes are rumored to remain locked within a private MI6 archive known only as the Long Room. Attempts to locate any surviving sonic devices or documents related to Specimen Valhalla have been repeatedly blocked at the highest levels of national security. Freedom of information requests made by investigative journalists in 2005 were denied on grounds of international diplomatic sensitivity. A heavily redacted letter from a former MI6 official remarked, "It wasn't a weapon. It was a prison made of noise. And the prisoners are still screaming." No public acknowledgement of Raven Group's operation or the Anda transmissions has ever been made by the British or Chinese governments. Scholars continue to speculate whether the technology was ever perfected or deployed during later conflicts. Given the secrecy and the disappearance of key witnesses, many historians believe the true purpose of Specimen Valhalla was not just to inflict pain, but to contain human consciousness in a state of perpetual terror, stored on magnetic tape. And, somewhere beneath ice and rubble in Manchuria, there may still be reels waiting to be found. On March 3, 1958, a classified Soviet expedition known as Taskforce Sever departed Murmansk with a convoy of scientific personnel, KGB operatives, and 14 crates marked with the Soviet emblem for high-priority biological isolation. The mission's cover story described a geological survey north of Novaya Zemlya. In reality, the operation aimed to recover the remains of a downed German cargo aircraft detected months earlier beneath a glacier near the Kara Sea. The crash site matched the coordinates of a lost Luftwaffe flight dated April 1945, registered to an SS detachment allegedly transporting sensitive special cargo. Task Force Sever's files were sealed for decades, but fragments were leaked in 1992 by a retired GRU officer. According to his testimony, when the Soviet team excavated the plane, they discovered cylindrical metal containers adorned with runes and occult inscriptions, neither German nor Russian in origin. The containers emitted faint gamma radiation, and several soldiers fell ill with internal hemorrhaging after handling them. Before the KGB could secure the site, a violent snowstorm struck the camp. radio logs from base command recorded erratic transmissions filled with screams and the phrase, "Nicht von hier," not from here. 3 days later, a rescue unit found the camp deserted except for one survivor. Dr. Pavel Orlov, a radiochemist, who had clawed his own face and written the word demon in blood on the snow. Orlov died shortly after being airlifted to a military hospital, muttering about an engine of light that whispers. The containers were transported to a secret facility near Arkhangelsk, known internally as Laboratory 12 for Sever. All documentation regarding the crash artifacts was classified under Directive AZ-81. By September 1959, Laboratory 12 for Sever reported the development of an experimental propulsion device powered by radiation from the recovered objects. Internal memoranda described successful ignition tests of an energy pulse capable of levitating a 3-ton platform for several seconds. The project was abruptly halted after a containment breach killed 9 personnel. Witnesses described a blinding flash followed by total silence before the victims' bodies collapsed. Their bodies exhibited bizarre cellular degradation, resembling severe microwave exposure. In 1961, a Soviet naval drill near Murmansk coincided precisely with the launch of an unidentified cylindrical object from a classified coastal platform. Eyewitnesses aboard the cruiser, Admiral Ushakov, reported a vertical column of pale light ascending into the atmosphere, disappearing without sound. The Soviet government dismissed it as an atmospheric experiment. However, a declassified CIA reconnaissance report from January 1962 acknowledged the launch, noting its trajectory was inconsistent with any known rocket and vanished abruptly beyond radar. The KGB terminated all discussion of the artifacts in 1963. Surviving participants of Taskforce Sever were relocated to isolated military zones. One technician, Viktor Melkov, later wrote in a private diary, confiscated in 1974, that the object was not terrestrial and contained inscriptions that resembled instructions or warnings. He claimed the KGB intended to weaponize it, but abandoned the project after a party official died during a demonstration that altered the room's gravity. Melkov disappeared shortly after his diary was discovered. In 1987, seismic monitoring stations across the Arctic recorded a deep, unexplained explosion under the ice shelf near the original crash site. The Soviet Ministry of Natural Resources reported it as tectonic movement, but recently declassified Norwegian radar logs detected a brief but intense electromagnetic surge consistent with an artificial detonation. Some intelligence analysts now believe the Soviets returned to the glacier to destroy any remaining artifacts, or to test the device once more. After the collapse of the USSR, several attempts were made by Western researchers to obtain information about Taskforce Sever. All requests were denied. A 1996 joint Swedish-Russian scientific team investigating radiation anomalies near Novaya Zemlya was abruptly recalled without explanation. Eyewitnesses claimed Russian military sealed off a section of ice after Swedish researchers reported strange metallic fragments. Their samples were confiscated, and the team members signed non-disclosure agreements before departing. As of today, the Russian Federation continues to enforce a no-fly zone over portions of the northern Kara Sea. Satellite imagery from 2010 showed large circular depressions in the ice aligned in a geometric pattern. Soon after, the images were scrubbed from public databases. Experts speculate that whatever Soviet scientists discovered under the ice, it may still be active, buried within government facilities or sealed beneath the tundra. Whatever the origin of the artifact, its presence blurred the line between Nazi occult research and Cold War weapons development. The silence from both governments suggests a shared understanding that some technologies retrieved from wartime archives were never meant to be used or even understood. And somewhere beneath the ice, remnants of the original crashed plane may still lie, along with whatever was inside those cursed metal cylinders. Unless, as some documents imply, the Soviets did not merely recover them, but launched one back into the sky. In early March 1962, as the Algerian War of Independence neared its violent conclusion, French intelligence intercepted a series of coded radio transmissions emanating from a remote airstrip outside Constantine. The signals were traced to the Organisation Armée Secrète, OAS, a pro-colonial paramilitary group operating with increasing desperation. But deeper analysis revealed references to Morgenrot, an SS-era codename identified in a long-classified OSS brief regarding unexploded Axis nuclear prototypes allegedly smuggled out of Germany in 1945. The brief had been filed away and forgotten until the transmissions surfaced again, this time in North Africa. French agent Jean-Luc Marceau, operating undercover as a supply clerk near the airfield, reported seeing German-speaking men in Luftwaffe-style leather coats supervising the loading of heavy steel crates onto an old Junkers Ju-52. The crates bore faded Reich Eagle insignias partially painted over with the OAS emblem. Marceau managed to photograph the scene before being discovered. His final transmission stated simply, "They have it, something they call the Dawn device." Hours later, Marceau was found in a shallow pit outside a village, executed with a single shot to the head. 4 days later, French colonial authorities intercepted a courier carrying a bundle of aged documents wrapped in oilskin. Among them were blueprints featuring a compact spherical core surrounded by depleted uranium sheathing, labeled Morgenrot Gerate. A handwritten note in German declared, "The prototype is small enough to fit in a truck. The blast yield, if fully armed, would equal 2 Hiroshimas." The French Internal Security Service, SDECE, attempted to seize all related files, but one of the photographs was leaked to a Paris journalist named Jacques Delambre, who vanished before publishing an exposé. His apartment was ransacked, and the only missing item was the photograph. The suspicion arose that remnants of SS technology had been purchased or inherited by OAS factions as leverage against both the French government and Algerian independence forces. American intelligence became involved after intercepting references to Morgenrot in CIA wiretaps. Internal memos from a 1962 CIA briefing titled Black Cipher suggest concern that rogue SS cells retained one or more functional micronuclear prototypes and were now positioning them for sale or detonation. A chilling footnote reads, "If shipment reaches South America, trace protocols fail entirely." At the same time, the Argentine government quietly submitted a request to Interpol regarding suspicious cargo flights originating from Algiers and landing near Cordoba. The flights were chartered by a private European shipping firm known to employ former Nazi officers. One cargo manifest, partially recovered by Interpol, listed industrial mining equipment, but referenced crate dimensions identical to those recorded by Marceau in Constantine. Interpol officials attempted to examine the shipment, but were blocked by diplomatic intervention. All files were sealed under the pretext of national security. In October 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a minor blip on US Air Force radar, an unidentified aircraft briefly approaching the Caribbean, then turning south, was noted but dismissed as noise. A subsequent note in Air Force file JAG 114 mentions the possibility that Morgenrot materials may have been in transit simultaneously with Soviet missiles. The report warns, if confirmed, we face a two-tier nuclear threat, state-sponsored and extremist clandestine. By 1964, independent investigators discovered that dozens of former SS officers living under assumed names in Argentina and Paraguay had suddenly come into vast wealth. One such figure, a man calling himself Friedrich Weber, constructed a fortified compound in Patagonia. A visiting German journalist later described seeing a metallic sphere sealed within a bunker under guard at all times. The journalist died shortly after returning to Europe. The official cause, accidental poisoning. His notes were confiscated by West German intelligence. Documents declassified in 2005 reveal that the French government paid a covert ransom in November 1963 to an unnamed faction associated with Projekt Morgenrot. The payment was listed as humanitarian relief. Immediately after the transfer, the OAS disbanded a key operational cell, and several of their German advisors disappeared into South America. French records indicate the ransom was likely an attempt to buy back or disable a portable nuclear device. Whether the device was surrendered, destroyed, or retained remains unknown. No official record of its disposition exists. Today, the original Morgenrot blueprints remain locked in classified archives across multiple nations. Requests for their release are routinely denied under the grounds of international counter-proliferation law. The surviving fragments of Marceau's photos still circulate in intelligence communities as cautionary evidence of what happens when wartime relics outlive the war itself. Historians still debate whether the device was ever fully operational, or if the OAS intended to use it as blackmail. But scattered reports from Chile and Brazil in the late 1960s describe German-speaking men meeting in clandestine conclaves, carrying metallic suitcases never far from their reach. A CIA memo from 1969, heavily redacted, identifies a persistent rumor. Morgenrot has not ended, it has merely moved. The gold shipments, the executions, the vanished journalists, all remain officially unsolved. But within private intelligence circles, Projekt Morgenrot is spoken of as the ultimate ghost weapon. A nuclear device hidden in plain sight, traded like contraband, forever unaccounted for, waiting for the right hand, or the wrong one, to detonate a forgotten piece of the Third Reich's vengeance. If the rumors are true, somewhere in a basement or vault in South America, the dawn of Morgenrot still pulses quietly in the dark. The ghosts of the past aren't silent. They scream through classified memos and disappearances, through ruins no map dares to mark. Some truths were never meant to survive, yet they cling to the edges of history like a warning left in code. These are not mere stories. They are breaches, ruptures in the official narrative. And somewhere, hidden behind closed doors and cold steel, the last echoes of that forgotten war continue to pulse in the dark.